Welcome guys. Robert Ian Bonnick here, RIB. So now this is our last in the Knowledge Share series. Tonight is called How to Embrace Unity, Diversity and Inclusion. Now this is probably one of the most important knowledge shares that I've done, because as I'll get into tonight, I'll go into, what is embracing unity, diversity and inclusion all about? Why is it important that we all need to know? Now, I'm talking whether you're an entrepreneur, whether you're a leader, whether you're a coach, you need to know this. Right? This is something which our world needs right now. If you're a human being, you need to know this, all right? So we're getting to that. We're also getting to, a little of background story about me of why I do this work and why it permeates everything which I do. And I'll also go into a story that unites it all, that brings it all together. And then finally, at the end, we'll have a closing. And again, there's no offer here. There's no sell. But if you do want to reach out to me, if you do want to work with me, you can do that, obviously, of course. Now, before we get started, I'm making sure that I'm going live on Instagram Live and YouTube Live and Facebook Live. So I'm just checking with you, Bella. Are we live on Instagram Live yet? We are? Okay, I just don't see it here. No problem. It will come later on. Give me 1 second, guys. Just make sure that I cover this. So this way, if you do have any questions, I can then get to you. So give me another 30 seconds. Great. All right, we're live there. Wonderful. Great. All right, so we're live. Now, let's get into this now. So when I say unity, diversity and inclusion, what does this mean to us? Because for a lot of people, it's like, yeah, unity, I get what unity is. Unity is a coming together of different, people around this unity consciousness, this consciousness that we're all part of the same thing. We all come from the same source, right? So for a lot of people, unity is that. Now, when it comes to diversity, is this wonderful mix that we all are. I remember, Jamaican background. I haven't been to Jamaica yet, which is interesting, but I'm looking forward to actually going pretty soon once all this craziness is over. And I remember, seeing like a Chinese-looking guy who spoke perfect patois, and to me, that's what patois is, the native language of Jamaica. And, so he didn't look what I would call Jamaican, yet he spoke with a beautiful, perfect accent, right? So this diversity embraces, the fact that we may look like we're from different places, or we may, in fact, be from different places, but this diversity, this cultural mix of different religions, ideologies, cultures, religiosities, and backgrounds in general, this gives us this rich tapestry, this fabric of diversity, which our community, now I'm here in Bali, Indonesia, a tropical nomad, recording this live as we speak to you. And, Bali's got, 5 or 6 different religions that all interoperate, that all have their own respect, their own day and days when it comes to, celebration and holidays, which is all of them included onto the calendar. So this is what that diversity piece is really all about. Now, when it comes to inclusion, inclusion is, for example, many years ago, I was in the US. Now, things have probably changed now. This is 20 years ago, right? So things have probably changed now. But what I noticed was that, in New York, right? So it was, a rich tapestry of cultures, of ideologies, of backgrounds, of the ways that people saw their lives and each other. But what I noticed was that each place was divided from the others. You had a Latino block, a black block, so you're having all these cultures in the same area, but each of them was separated. So now inclusion is the opposite of that. Inclusion is that all of these cultures are mixed in together. are mixed in together. And as we know, I mean, my partner Marina is from Jakarta, Indonesia. So our kids, are a mix of Indonesian, they're a mix of English, a mix of Jamaican, and a few other things, right? So these kids are like global kids, right? They've got all these different things going on, and we're not alone. There are people who are like same culture relationships, other people that cross culture relationships, and the outcome is that these kids look all different, right? So we are, whether we like it or not, when we go to work, the chances are that right now we're going to be faced with working with different types of people, with different types of backgrounds, with different types of beliefs, right? We're going to think different about certain key crucial things, and that's at work. When we go out, if our kids, we have 2 kids, right? So as I mentioned before, when they're going out and playing sport or doing something extracurricular activity, right? Now these ones are surrounded by different cultures, expats from Russians, from German, Spanish, Italian, French. So all different mixes, different cultures. Now, each of these groups have got a different way to view religion, a different way to look at politics, a different way to look at one another. Right? I mean, how often is it, that you look, if I said to you, black, what is the next word, if we're playing word association, what's the word that comes into your mind? If I said to you white, what's a word that comes into your mind? Be honest. If I said Chinese, what's a word or phrase that comes into your mind? If I said German, do you think of efficiency and preciseness and so on, right? So for each culture, if I said to you something South American, maybe I say Brazil, do you think of hot, caliente, warm, very emotional, passionate, driven people? Is that the idea that comes into your mind? So we've all been programmed with a view of what it means to be Chinese, black, white, Asian, Malaysian, Greek, Turkish, Italian, French, Russian, German, Prussian, Yugoslavian, Croatian. Right? We all have a different idea on what that looks like to us. So, I'll give you an example, when I was at school, so this is, I'm going to get into my story a little bit later on, but when I was at school, I had a very Caucasian set of values, let's say from the age of, say, 6, 7, 8, up to like 12, no, to probably about 13, 14. So the way that I spoke very well. I still speak pretty well, but before I was very well spoken, right? Very well spoken, even more so than now. And, if people heard me on the phone, they would have thought I was white. And in fact, quite a few times when I met up with the parents or the people that I was talking to on the phone, it's like, oh, I didn't realize you were black. Now, take that as you want. So, but the point I'm trying to make is that things aren't always what they appear. And a lot of the time we come preloaded, pre-programmed based upon our upbringing and childhood on what certain cultures, on certain religions, what they mean, what they stand for, and the people behind them, what they stand for and what they mean, right? So this we can't help. And what happens is that at work, all of these things collide. Our preconditioned ideals of what we believe a black person should be, a Chinese person should be, a Greek person should be, an Italian person should be, a Russian person should be. All of these different ideologies come in the one place, and if we don't extend a level of empathy or understanding, then we can pretty soon find ourselves in hot water. They always say, when you're watching movies or when you're dealing with actors, don't talk about, this is always told to me when I was younger, you don't talk about politics, religion, and don't work with kids or animals. These were the 4 things that I was told as I was coming through doing acting and different things that I was trying my hand at the time. I'm not really an actor. And, so again, but it's just pre-programming. Now, why it's important is that as we go forward in the world, our humanity is being, I wouldn't say under attack, that's way too powerful, but it is, right? You know, like we are now being put together with people that we don't necessarily understand. We're being put together, and our philosophies of what certain cultures mean is being put under the spotlight. I'll give you another example. Doing a great course called the Forum, Landmark Forum. I think it was Landmark Forum. Yeah, it was, in Australia, in Sydney. Now, one of the experiments, I call it an experiment, it wasn't called an experiment, but that's just my vernacular, is that you would sit in front of someone, you know, maybe about a foot apart, so not great social distancing, a foot apart. And the idea is that you'd sit down and you'd look at each other right in the eye as I'm looking at you right now. And I would stare at you and you would stare at me. Now, you could blink, but you couldn't look away. So I could do this and look back at you, but I couldn't do this and look away, right? And the idea was that I think that first one was for 3 minutes. So it was 3 minutes, 5 minutes, and it was longer than that. But 3 minutes is a long time. So you're there staring at another person. And it could be another girl, it could be another guy, different backgrounds, colors, mixtures, all of that. So you'll be sitting there, and for the first maybe 30 seconds, what was often present was giggles. You know, you're kind of laughing, like, oh, because it's kind of funny and uncomfortable at the same time. So you go through this uncomfort and you're laughing. Then the next period would be one of, okay, now I'm looking at this person, you know, and now you start to get a bit, you know, you think, you know, like, you start to become a bit self-obsessed, meaning it's like, you know, how am I looking? How am I thinking? What do they think of me? What do they think of me? And this is a really powerful stage. And in the next stage, you start to realize that you're projecting what you believe to be true about them onto them without even realizing it. It's this projection again, this projection. And then you would sit there, and if you could keep going, what would happen is that their faces would begin to change. So you'd be looking right at their eyes, but as you look at someone's eyes, you start to become aware, even though you're still looking in their eyes, you start to become aware of their ears, of their chin, of their forehead, of their nose, of their mouth. And these things will begin to change, a bit like, you know, what I used to think is that, you know, you're looking at someone's past lives, right? Whether that's true or not, I can't really answer, but that's what it looked like. It's like this person's face would change before my very eyes, and vice versa is happening. Now we're beginning to approach 3 minutes. So if you're doing a 3-minute one, then it will begin to end pretty soon after that. But if you're doing a 5 or 10 minute, I think I got up to 7 minutes. You know, then you start to go deeper into this projection of what you believe this person to be, and their face begins to change right in front of you. Now, what you don't realize is that what you're beginning to dissolve is this separation between me and you. And we begin to dissolve kind of into one another, which sounds a bit weird, but when you do this, you'll get exactly what I mean. Or if you've done it, you'll get exactly what I mean. And you begin to realize that there's no separation between you and me, you and I. So we're dissolving on this level, and in a way you could call this unity consciousness, this understanding that we're part of a much bigger picture, that we're part of this universal pool of energy, this source energy that we call God, or whatever you want to refer to it or call it, this organizing force that we're all part of. I think there was a friend back in the days of when I was studying chemistry saying that I think everything in our world is made up of like 4 or 5 elements, which are in everything. But they're vibrating at different frequencies and different intensities, which allow them to be either liquid, vapor, solid, semi-solid, and so on. Okay, and the way we look at something changes the view, and it gives us color, this spectrum of color. So what I'm trying to say to you is that at our core, we're all part of the same thing. Yet our identity, that identity that we not necessarily come in with, but the identity that we put on as we grow up as kids, you know, as our parents start to tell us, oh, you're good at sport, you're really good at music, you know, you're an amazing listener, you're so handsome, you're beautiful, I love the way you look, you have such a great body, you know, you look amazing. Now, again, I have 2 kids, and we want to tell our kids this thing, right? But what's happening is that we begin to build up this identity. Now, that's not really a challenge. The challenge becomes when we start to not only have this identity, but start to identify with it, i.e., this is who I am. So I am a plumber. I am a doctor. I am depressed. I am stressed. I am alive. I am dead. All right? I am great at sport. I'm terrible at sport. I'm very lovable. I'm not lovable at all, right? So this identity starts to build up. And as I was sitting having a great lunch today with a good mate, Richard, my brother from another mother, South Africa, Richard, we're talking about this. You know, we're talking about, you know, this identity that we come in with, and we start to identify it, forgetting that we are part of something far more vast. It's like a glass of water that you put a lid on, and I don't remember who told me this the other day, but I'm using it now because it's a great analogy. It's a glass of water that we put a lid on, and we put that glass, there's water in it, and we put that glass into the ocean. Now, the ocean is not strong enough to remove the lid. So what then happens is that over time, the water inside that glass will start to turn a different color. And it will start to make its way, I think, green, and eventually will end up black if you leave it long enough. Now, it's part of the universe at large. But because it has the lid on, it's a different color to everything else. So it's separate from its source. You follow me? So it's separate from its source. And in many ways, our identity can appear the same way. That ego comes in later. And I'm not saying ego is good or bad, by the way, but ego comes in. And then we start to, you know, like, I am better than you. I am better than them. I am more superior. And all of these things can start to make their way in. Now, going back to this analogy, the minute that we remove the lid, the ocean sea comes into the glass, washes the water out, and now the water on the inside of the glass is the same on the water of the out. There's no separation, right, in terms of the water, right? And now, obviously, we can kind of dissolve the glass and there's absolutely no separation. But the point of that analogy is just to show you, you know, just to give you a visual reference of how our identity and our ego can believe, we start to believe that we are separate from one another, start to believe, you know, perhaps that you know, I am better than this person, or I am worse than this person, or I need to look up to this person, or I need to look down to this person, and so on, and so on, and so on. So now this identity in this equation of embracing unity, diversity, and inclusion can throw a bit of a spanner in the works. And this is what comes up when we start to project our view and our vision on what a Chinese person should look like, act like, speak like, on what a black person should look like, speak like, act like, from what a white person should look like, speak like, act like, and Greek, German, French, Russian, Prussian, Croatian, and so on. Right? So this is in a way what's kind of happening within from this grander view that we're part of source energy, however you want to refer to that. And we have these identities, each of us, that we come into the world with. And if we're not careful, then we start to build a wall around these identities and start to believe that these identities are who we are. So instead of me, you know, I am not a headache. I'm having a headache. Okay, so I am not depressed. I am experiencing depression. I am not anxiety. I'm experiencing anxiety, and so on and so on and so on. So I'm just giving you a view here to look at this from. Okay, so that's, unity, diversity, and inclusion. If you're just joining us from Instagram or one of the other feeds that we're on, so my name is Robert Ian Bonnick. I'm talking today about embracing unity, diversity, and inclusion. This is the last of 6 powerful knowledge shares, which have been from all different parts of, I guess, what makes me me. You know, we've been through hospitality, we've been through speaking your purpose. So if you look at, if you're on Facebook, SpeakuP Monday group, go in there and you'll find all the back copies or the ones we've done before, let's call it that. And if you're on YouTube, then Robert Ian Bonnick with dash, and go to SpeakuP Monday, and you'll find all of that on YouTube as well. Okay, and that's probably YouTube and Facebook Live are probably the best ways to view this in terms of a viewing experience. So now moving on to the next. So we've identified unity, diversity, and inclusion. We know what it is. We know why it's important and why it can divide us. So now I'd like to share a little story about my upbringing and why this is so relevant in what I do every day, because this permeates everything which I do. So where life started for me, now for those of you who know my story already, you know that maybe you'll hear something different this time, maybe not. But those who haven't, strap yourselves in. So I was born in London, and at the age of 6 months, I found myself with my elder sister. We were basically spent the next 18 years in 2 children's homes in London, and these children's homes in London taught me various things. Now, the first thing in context to this conversation, because I was always the youngest one, I was an introvert at home, for the most part very shy, painfully shy, and an extrovert at school because I was great at sport, and I was this was part of my winning formula. Part of the way that I coped with my introversion was to be extroverted at school and like an actor, basically. Now, in the children's home, because I was 6 months old, slowly making my way towards 17, 18, at which point is where they say, okay, you're done, get out, right? Next one in, right? Well, not next one in, but at 17, 18 is when you're thrust out into the world, right? So what happens is that during that time of me growing up, there would be over 100 kids I would have seen come in, come out. Because usually it's not 6 months, that's way too young. But usually, maybe 8, 9, 10. So they're in for 4 or 5 years, they reach 17 and they're out. So I saw all this happening. Now, the important part is this. So as I mentioned to you earlier on, I had a Caucasian set of values from a very young age, from around about 7, 8 to around 14. Roughly. I was the only black kid at school for the first, apart from one other actually, for about the first 13, 14 years. And it was David and Rosalind, the 2 other ones. And so what happened was that I became obsessed with this Caucasian set of values. So the way that I spoke, the way that I would dress, the way that I would hold my body was all leading towards this Caucasian way of being, right? And clearly I'm not a Caucasian, I'm a black guy. I didn't know that at the time, clearly. So what happened is that I used to, spend time in the children's home with a mirror up to my face. And I would look into the mirror and I would look at the things I wanted to change. I wanted to change my nose, it was too broad. I wanted to change my lips, they were too fat. I wanted to change my pointy head because it was just too pointy, right? So all of these things were putting me in a state of being very down, maybe depressed at certain areas, certain times. And the important part here is that, I began to find a voice that was there that wasn't a voice that was pulling me down, that was saying that you were not good enough, you're not white enough, right? You're not this enough, you're not that enough. I found a voice which was in there, which was a warm, supportive voice in probably in the lowest part of where I could be. And this went on for years, by the way, about two years or so. No one knew this was going on because I was in the room by myself. And I found this voice. His voice said to me, warm, supportive voice. It said, Rob, just look after your skin, right? So Rob, just look after your skin. And this warm, important voice, I began to pay more and more attention to. And this will come up later. So just keep that one in the back of your mind. the other thing which I realized was that, the other black kids in the children's home, because the children's home was pejoratively black and my school was white, basically. And I started to look at and look down upon some of my fellow brothers and sisters in the choices that they were making, in how they acted, so it's like this reverse racism, which sounds really weird, right? Some of you watching this might be able to relate to what I'm talking about. Maybe some of you think that's a bit crazy, but anyway, stay with me. So I was becoming like racist against my own kind. And this was this patterning and conditioning, which I'm not blaming anybody for. This is what I allowed to happen. Okay, it was me, and so I began to look differently, and this only pushed me more towards a Caucasian perspective of beauty, a Caucasian perspective of how one should speak and how one should express oneself, how one should communicate. In other words, so why is this relevant? What I realized was this: when I failed a whole bunch of exams, what I had to do is I had to retake my exams. And what happened is that the college where I went to, when I was just over 16, the college that I went to was pejoratively black. So now we've gone from a school where I was the only black kid, basically, into a place where now I'm amongst other black people, like many, and there's very, very, very few white kids. So this presented a culture shock for me. Right, this was a time that I was more scared and petrified of my own race and color than ever before. And it sounds crazy to say that, but this is what was really going on for me on the inside of me, because my identity was shifting. Right, so I began to embrace both. Okay, now there's other things that happen in the children's home, but not relevant to the story that I'm going to tell you. So now, in the backdrop to this, there's one other story there's two other stories I want to share with you, and then we'll bring all of this together. So now, at the age of around 12, I say 12, I'm not sure if it was 12, maybe it was 13 or 14, but 12 is what I remember. But again, it could be open to interpretation. I could be wrong by 1 or 2 years. In history, at school, now we are studying the 100 Years' War. Now this 100 Years' War was a war that was going on in the Middle East. As we know, there are many 100 Years' wars going on all over the world, some for a lot longer than 100 years. So a kid sitting next to me in class put his hand up. Miss, 100 Years' War, yes. It can't be the same people fighting, can it, miss? Think about it for one moment. For me, I didn't get it. I didn't get it at all. It went right over my head. So like most of the other kids in the classroom, when there's something that you don't understand, you point, you ridicule, and you laugh. And that's what I did at this kid who asked that question. Now, life has got a funny way of repaying favors, as some of you probably know already. So let's keep these three things together, right? So that I had the identity of being white. I had the identity of being black a little bit later on. In history, I was studying the 100 Years' War, not realizing that it is not the same people fighting. It's what we pass down to the next generation. I have 2 kids. I'm extremely aware of this, to infuse in my kids this understanding that you are no greater and no worse than anyone else. You're the same. It's just that we have different opportunities and make different decisions. Okay? That's really the only difference. Okay? So now, later on, about 6 months or so after that school history class, like I said, it could have well been later than 12. And, so I was beginning, like Sunday afternoons in our children's home. We would be in the back garden playing football. So what would happen was we'd have all the kids from the local neighborhood, young and old, all different cross-section of the community, criminals, gangsters, thugs, rich, poor. We had all of it, right? Because our children's home was in a white middle-class area in London, northeast London. But when people came to that back garden, it wasn't really about the football. It was about the fact that everyone seemed to drop the attitude, drop the preconceptions that we spoke about earlier on, and just relate as human beings around things that make us whole, things that make us human. Like we all want to be loved, respected, honored, fulfilled in what we're doing, regardless of color, age, background, ideology, and so on. So this back garden for me on a Sunday afternoon was a huge experience because what I saw and what I felt was humanity. And this was for many years, like growing all the way up. So you've got these conflicting stories, what appear to be conflicting stories, but the story I'm about to tell you now will bring it all together. So think about this. So now I'm between 12 and 14 years of age. I'm walking down the street in London with a friend of mine, Andy Campbell, another black guy. Now I was tall for my age, because I was an angry kid. I was strong. I was tall for my age, as I mentioned before, and I was angry because I was going through those moments of, the abandonment from my parents. That's why we're in the children's home the whole way. The conflicted understanding of what color am I? What is my place in the world? Where am I in the world? Who am I in the world, right? I had no foundation, which happens to a lot of teens at the moment. And I'm coaching a few teens at the moment, and I can still say that in some ways that's there. I was still learning who I was being and if I could trust myself. So now I'm walking down the street. On this case, I'll just use the N-word, right? So I was walking down the street in London. At this time, you have a flashpoint. You have skinheads, which are supposed to be neo-Nazi. You have mods, you have rockers, and you have like football hooliganism. It's like this time in the UK was a really violent, powerful, conflictious time. So that's the environment of what's happening now. Now I'm walking down the street and I hear this voice, and I'll say this word only once because I know it's going to offend some people, right? Oi, nigger. Go back to your own fucking country. It's powerful. The next thing I know, this tall, lanky guy comes out of the pub, up in my face, punches me. I fall down. The friend I'm with, Andy, hits him. This guy goes down. 2, 3 other guys come running out of the pub. I'm standing up now, a bit shell-shocked. Now, they're running in our direction, and I know from the look on their face that these guys are not there to say hello. These guys are there because they want to hurt me. They want to hurt us. So now I'm running. So I'm running fast. And it happened so fast. And the next thing I know, that I don't feel like someone's chasing me anymore. Fight, flight, or freeze. I was flying out of there. I was thinking that Andy is with me too. So I'm turning around expecting to see Andy. I turn around and Andy's not there. So I turned back and I looked down the street, and I'll never forget the sight that I saw. It was like there was something on the floor that maybe by now 8 to 10 people were kicking. It's like a rag doll on the floor, curled up in a ball, and they're kicking. To my horror, what I realized was that was Andy on the floor being kicked and kicked and kicked. So now I'm walking back in that direction, and I'm faced with a horrifying decision. So I know that if I go back there the whole way in, I'm likely to be that guy on the floor being kicked. And I don't want to be kicked. then I also realized that if I don't go back there, then I'm going to be racked with guilt and shame because this friend, Andy, is getting a kicking instead of me in my place. Now, fight, flight, or freeze. Now I'm completely frozen. And what's happening now is that there's this succession of thoughts coming over me that I can't believe that's happening. But I believe that people are inherently good. So now what happens is that there's more guys coming out of the pub. Now I'm thinking, that they're there to pull these guys off and to stop all this nonsense. And they pull the guys aside. Yeah, they do that. But then they lay in extra boots. By now I can see, I can hear, and part of me can feel every kick. It's horrifying, terrifying. 12, 14 years old, grown men kicking this friend of mine. I don't know if he's alive, I don't know if he's dead. And I'm there, the guy who's a coward. I'm there, the guy who is frozen. Right? And when these other guys came in, it was like the cowboys and Indians. Like we were taught in history, that the Indians were the savages and the cowboys were the good guys. Many years later, as most of you know, that wasn't really the case now, was it? Okay? So what I'm seeing now is this breakdown of beliefs, this breakdown of innocence within me. Because I'm realizing now that things aren't as I believe they should be. Good doesn't always seem to triumph over evil. That's what I was thinking, right? And I'm petrified now. And I'm shaking. Now, what happens next? And I wrote a book called Soul Survivor, How an Abandoned Child Goes From Nothing to Everything. And it goes into a lot more detail that I'll spare you from here. But what happened is that these girls, presumably who are girlfriends of some of the guys, came out and just shamed these guys into stopping. You should be ashamed of yourself. There's one of him and there's like 10 or 15 of you. Aren't you the men? Right? Just shaming them to stop. And these guys just probably realized what they were doing was stupid and just were like, oh man, and they just stopped. Now at this point, like Andy got up and then he ran towards me and then we both just ran. So, the upshot of this is that Andy, look, he was okay. He was bruised and bloodied, but he was alive, which thank God, right? To this very day, if that guy would have died, I don't know what I would have done. But here's the thing, and this is where the stories come together. What I realized was this: in the days that followed, there was shame on my side. There was guilt that I didn't do anything. I was supposed to be a tough kid, and I watched my friend get hurt for me. Right? There was anger. I wanted revenge. I really wanted to find this guy and deal out whatever was in my mind. I wanted to inflict pain on this guy, the same pain. With each kick, he robbed me of my innocence. That's how I felt. So I was really angry. I was really mad and upset. So on day number 3, I remember it like it was yesterday. On day number 3, I remembered the classroom. I remembered the kid sitting next to me, putting his hand up, talking about the 100 Years' War. And I remembered, then I got it. I realized that whoever this guy was, I had a choice, because the chances are that he was brought up just like that. Maybe his parents were brought up fearing people that were not the same, and we fear what we don't understand. I began to understand that this guy, was probably in the zone of where mom and dad had taught him to hate black people. I got to understand that this guy was probably going through the time of realizing that 0 to 8, that was the train tracks of his conscious and subconscious mind about that. And then the rest of his time as a RAS, the reticular activating system, kicks in, this part of our brain which sorts and sifts all of the millions of images that we see every day into the ones that we pay attention to, the ones that our subconscious programming from 0 to 8 maps out for us. And then our RAS takes over, and that's all we see. Have you ever been in a situation where you get into an argument with a friend of yours and you wonder why they cannot see your point of view at all? It's like, but how can you not even see this? And you get mad and frustrated. It's a bit like that because we're coming from a different subconscious program. And what I realized was that this guy, as we all are, we are all trying to do the best we can with what we know at that moment. And sometimes we may look back and realize that we didn't really know a lot. Or sometimes we may look back and realize, man, I didn't really know enough, maybe. But as it happens, then I got to realize that he was brought up like that, though I didn't condone what he did. I began to realize that, how could he do any differently to what he did? If I was in his shoes, I had the programming he had, I had the upbringing that he had, I had the reaffirmations from my caregivers that he had, I had all these things from my friends, this reinforcement that he had. How could I be any different? In fact, I would probably be the same. I'll probably act the same, if not worse. So this is when I began to realize what empathy really was. Empathy is not sympathy. Empathy is being able to stand in the understanding and the realization that based upon our programming, our patterning, we are doing the best we can with what we know. When we get into an argument, a conflictuous situation with somebody else, when our programming leads us to believe that a Chinese person should be like that, a black person should be like that, a Greek person should be like that, a Russian person should be like that, a Greek person, and so on and so on and so on, should be like that, realizing that this is our subconscious programming from such a young age, and we're oblivious to it. We don't even know it. And we act it out every day like a subconscious program. When I got that, and this is at 12, again, it could have been 14, right? But 12, then I realized that I had a choice to be part of the problem or part of the solution. Problem, solution. And I knew right then and right there exactly which choice I was going to make. And I knew right there, right then, what I was going to be dedicating the rest of my life to, which was about how can I directly or indirectly create a positive shift through empathy in the lives of 1 billion people or plus. Directly or indirectly. And I do that, as you know, I'm an advisor, I'm a coach, a speaker, an author, right? And what I do is that, I help entrepreneurs, leaders, and coaches turn their story into impact and income. I help businesses do that. Okay, but what's fundamentally at the source of all of this is an understanding that if I can impact the impactors, if I can influence the influencers through empathy to see and acknowledge other people's struggles, strains, and worries, to realize and see that we all want the same things, right? Loved, honored, cherished, respected for who we are, fulfilled in what we're doing, regardless of color, race, ethnicity, and religiosity, and so on. If we can do that, then we begin to unravel this unity, diversity, and inclusion wherever we are. I began to realize, speaking today, Richard, like my role as a human being, as a leader in what I do, is to create other leaders. Right? That's my purpose. A leader creates other leaders. And I love doing that through empathy, through connecting with that, not condoning, but empathizing and understanding, because with empathy, we begin to drop it. We begin to, it's a bit like this. If I'm in a conversation with someone, conflict resolution, which I've been doing for years, running clubs and all the rest of that, but conflict resolution, what happens is this, is that, the first thing which I do is I listen. 3 types of listening. Listening to interrupt. We know what that one sounds like. Yeah, but I think, right? Listening, feigning to listen. Yeah, sure. But what I think, same thing. The final one is active listening. Active listening. Now, this is where I'm listening to what you are saying and what you're not saying. I listen with curiosity. Now, when I listen like that, I am fully present with you. Now, when I hear you, really hear you, then what happens for you is that you feel heard. The minute you feel heard, guess what opens up? Possibility and opportunity. But so often we don't realize that we have 1 of these and 2 of these. We don't realize that, do we? And we just keep on trying to nail our opinion on someone, not realizing how can they possibly understand us if we don't give them a chance. Really give them a chance and listen. Because the minute they have an opportunity to listen, it drops. That ego, it drops. Empathy rises, ego drops. When we see one another, then there's possibility for us to find common ground, to find a bridge. And that's what I do. I find bridges between people. So if you look back, as some of you noticed, 2,000 events is what I've co-created over a short period of time, 2,000 plus. I've brought 1.5 million people together around those events, created communities large and small. Communities larger than that, communities smaller than that. But how I do it, and I'm a great connector, right? So that's what I love to do. So for the people who I work with, leaders, coaches, entrepreneurs, in scaling their business, because there's a lot of areas. I'm 51 years of age. I've done a lot of things, from working with people like Madonna, from running businesses, co-running businesses, one voted number 3 in the world, working with celebrities, coaching, speaking on hundreds of stages over the years. So there's lots of things which I've done, being a coach, relationship coach, advisor. So all of this gets wrapped up in this advisor role, right? But really what it's about is that it's, advising, guiding, bringing empathy to all levels of entrepreneurship, all levels of leadership, in a way that when we can influence, when I can have an influence over the influencers, it's a positive influence. It's an influence of how can we see one another more? How can we use empathy more to identify who we are and our rackets, that's a foreign term, recognize the things which are holding us back, the things which are creating these walls of division between us. So then we stop seeing one another. Right? And we start to build, what is it? Black and white unite and fight. that one comes up. But also another one is this, divide and conquer. Right? So anything that creates division, right, I don't really subscribe to. I'm not going to go much deeper into it than that, because I could really go down the rabbit hole. But so then, the purpose of tonight really is for you, something inside of you, whoever's watching this, to feel and to understand, where is it that I can use empathy more in my life? Where is it that I'm not truly acknowledging and listening to another person, be it at work, be it my dad, be it my mom, be it my son, be it my daughter, be it my friend, right? So how can we really embrace this active listening? How can we really embrace this understanding that whoever we're across the table from are doing the best they can with what they know? And I'm not looking down or looking up. I'm looking straight ahead. Right? But understanding that then gives us an opportunity, to go deeper, gives us an opportunity to find that common ground, finding that common ground. And that, to me, in essence, is what embracing unity, diversity, and inclusion is all about. Okay, so now I'm just going to quickly look down here and just see. Look, usually we don't do questions on this one, but I just want to have a quick look to see if there's any questions on any of these feeds. Just give me a second, guys. Won't be long here. Okay, it looks like we're good. Great. So look, now what I want to leave you with, just checking the time. Okay, great. We're about time. That's good. Great. So I'd like to go under an hour with this one. So I was talking about this to Richard today. You know, embracing unity, diversity, and inclusion, what it really means at its core is to embrace freedom. Freedom from judgment. Freedom from putting someone in a box. Freedom from a false projector of what I believe this person is based on how they look. Freedom from, not using active listening, right? Freedom from, the limitations that we put on ourselves. Going back to that analogy of the glass within the ocean with the lid on top. When we remove that lid, we get to see and feel, this unity consciousness that we all have, that we can all share. Don't get me wrong, we're still going to make different choices and different decisions that will give us a different outcome. Right? I'm not saying that we're all going to become this homologous mass. I'm not saying that. But what I'm saying is, there's a great quote, from Nelson Mandela, right? And this was passed on to me from Richard. And remember, Ubuntu is a South African term, Ubuntu, which means that, I am you, you are me. In other words, without you, I don't exist. If that ties your brain in circles as it did for me many times, this quote from Nelson Mandela will help to seal it. So that quote is this, right? So use your freedom to enhance the freedom of others. So use your freedom to enhance the freedom of others. What comes up for you when you hear that one? Now look, as we begin to wrap this one up, if you are paying attention to our other streams, you've got SpeakuP Monday. Now SpeakuP Monday is a Q&A, a deep dive, award-winning Q&A that we do on Monday. That's 6:30 GMT +8 here in Bali. Please tune into that one. We interview entrepreneurs, leaders, coaches, and it's a deep dive Q&A unlocking extreme value, extreme inspiration, and for some motivation. Then on Tuesday, 7 a.m. GMT +8, that's Bali time, we do a clubhouse session, different guest, same approach. Clubhouse style. And then later on during the week, we have what we call a live stream. And that live stream, again, is a deep dive Q&A. So 3 different Q&A streams every week. We're up to over 130 now, I believe this will be. And it's been going for more than almost 2.5 years. So this deep dive is really powerful because it really allows us to see from these incredible guests that we have, from Hollywood actresses, Emmy Award winners, right, TEDx speakers, captains of industry, coaches, leaders, entrepreneurs, right? As different as they may appear from the outside, each week you'll see what unites us on the inside. My name is Robert Ian Bonnick. Thank you for listening. I look forward to seeing you soon. Lots of love. Have a great rest of your day or evening. based on what time it is wherever you are. Thank you for your attention. Feel free to share this or reach out to me if you want to know more. Thanks, guys. Bye for now.